The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have a delegation from Northern Virginia, Fairfax County with us here today. David Bulova, good to see you.
Great to see you.
Scott Surovell.
Thanks for having me again.
Kory, all delegates from the House of Delegates and the General Assembly, State of Virginia.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Delegate Kory, tell us how things are going on in your district these days.
My district is focused on education and lack of resources. My district is just growing and growing and growing, and especially the school system and higher ed as well just don't have room for all of the students that we have.
So I guess you were pleased with the announcement recently that you're going to hold harmless at least K through 12 and to some extent higher education.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't raised it for a number of years, but to have it be carved out as sort of protected is wonderful, and at least we don't have to anticipate serious issues that way. So you're right.
And Delegate Surovell, I understand there's a debate going on once again about the composite index and the need to protect that in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, the LCI is always an issue for those of us in Fairfax County because we get so little back from the state. And I think everybody agrees that that formula can be tweaked some to benefit Northern Virginia or to more fairly reflect the burdens on our school system by including things like English as a second language issues or disabled student populations. We have just huge populations of special needs kids and children that need remedial English that other parts of the state don't have, that isn't built into the formulas, but it's definitely something we're all focused on. And
how's your district faring in terms of employment and the economy?
Well, you know, the 44th District is everything between the Wilson Bridge, the Potomac River, Fort Belvoir, and I guess Huntley Meadows Park, Telegraph Road, roughly. It's very similar to Kay's district in terms of the demographics.
We argue over who has the most diverse population and the largest number of low incomes.
Yeah, the 44th district has a lot of low-income families, a lot of need for social services, a huge Medicaid population. Over, I think, 17% of my constituents get their health care from Medicaid presently, and so when the minimum wage stays flat, when the economy's flat, you know, those folks really tend to struggle, especially in an area that has high living costs like Fairfax County. And you know, I don't hear from them as much because they're so busy working and making ends meet. But they're definitely struggling, and you see it play out in different ways. You hear about it from the hospitals, you hear about it from the schools. So there's definitely struggles.
Actually, most of the schools in my district, and I think the same is true for you, Scott, have more than 60% free and reduced lunch.
More than 60%.
More than that, and it's all of them, the elementary, middle school, and high school.
Right.
It doesn't reflect the general population of Fairfax County, but it still is costs more to educate them.
Yep. And what about in your district, Delegate Bulova?
Yeah, no, thank you. Similar issues, especially with education. I think Scott really hit it on the nose, you know, with respect to needing to make sure we protect what we have, but also protect against changes to the local composite index. And so, for instance, there have been a couple of bills this year that have tried to piecemeal change the local composite index, which would ultimately result in Fairfax County and the city of Fairfax receiving less money. I think everybody agrees that we need to look at the LCI from a comprehensive standpoint. There's some things in there that should be in there. So, for instance, it doesn't take into account the hotel and motel tax as a way to generate revenue. By including that, that would actually benefit Fairfax County and Fairfax City. But what we need to fight against is piecemeal changing that formula. Transportation is the other big issue in my district. The northern part of my district is bounded by I-66. We desperately need to be making improvements to that, but we also have some of the very worst congestion on our secondary roads. And so we need to ensure that the good work we did a couple years ago with respect to new revenue for transportation goes to the projects that really need to be implemented.
Because as I understand it, secondary roads have not been maintained because of funding issues over the past number of years.
And I'm dealing with an issue right now in a neighborhood called Fairfax Villa, where the maintenance has gotten so bad they're able to repave half the neighborhood. They're actually having to reconstruct the roads in the other half because we've let it go so bad. And so when you think in terms of cost efficiencies, we've let the maintenance go so long that we're having to actually replace roadways, and that's something that we should have been able to avoid.
And of course, Delegate Surovell, Route 1 is part of your district. You've got a lot of needs there, including transportation. To what extent has the funding package that was passed back in 2013 had an impact yet in your district?
It hasn't had an impact yet. We actually have I think the largest or second largest road project in all Northern Virginia going on right now in the 44th District, right through Fort Belvoir. It's a $180 million road widening, but it's being funded entirely by the United States Army because there's no state money for that. We just completed the Route 1 multimodal study, which has recommended the construction of a median dedicated bus rapid transit system from Huntington all the way down to Woodbridge, and a two-stop metro extension, one at Beacon Hill and one in Hannibal Valley. The funding for that hasn't been identified yet, but the NVTA is going to have to be a source of that. We're going to need to get money from the feds, the state government, local government, and the NVTA to pay for it. And the first step is we have to actually get Route 1 on the NVTA's list. Right now, only the widening of Route 1's on the list, but not the construction of the BRT or the yellow line. So that's something we're working on right now. And I think the NVTA is about to start finalizing their list of projects. I'm hoping that the widening of Route 1 will be on that because the county prioritized it as one of their top 5 projects, but not the construction of the BRT. So they're making progress.
Yeah. Delegate Kory, I know that you know how dependent the Commonwealth is on the federal government.
Yes.
And that's an unfortunate circumstance the Commonwealth finds itself in, given what's happening in Washington in terms of sequestration, the across-the-board cuts,
Yes.
A large burden of which has been set upon our military installations and the Pentagon. So talk to us about the impact in your district of sequestration.
Well, it has made it has created a big problem for education. Many more students are now in the public school system that would have been in private. And of course, we're overcrowded already, and it just makes it even harder. We're actually beginning to convert empty office buildings to schools in my district.
Really?
It's rather controversial, but when you have more than half of the student bodies in a trailers, you have to do something. And it's also been a problem for small businesses. A number of small businesses in my district, especially, that's where immigrants make that's where they establish themselves first. And we have a lot of immigrants in my district. And small businesses are just closing every time you turn around. But the people can't move because of the value of the housing. And of course, we have transportation problems too. Route 7 is a mess. And Columbia Pike is a mess too. And when the streetcar project, the joint one between Fairfax County and Arlington, which the state was going to participate in, when that collapsed, nothing took its place. So we still have a lot of issues of moving people, and that actually has to do with military too, because it would go all the way down to the Pentagon. So unfortunately, our issues are very similar.
And Scott, in terms of sequestration, a lot of the government contractors, those who were fortunate enough to remain on the federal payroll, for example, had salaries cut. That's had an impact on state revenues, has it not?
There's no question that the impacts on government contract in Northern Virginia have not only hurt tax collections, it's increased the need for services.
Yeah.
I have constituents that have told me they've had people who were on a contract basis had problems paying their rent because their contracts got deferred. When we had the government shut down for 3 weeks last year,
Yep.
It was felt all the way down. The first people to get laid off are the temporary lowest income wage workers that are there on a weekly or monthly basis, and I think all of that is continuing to revert or echo through our budget constantly. And it's all highlighted the need for us to get invested and trying to develop other parts of the economy instead of just the federal contracting side. It's been great for Virginia in down years, but now Virginia is actually, I think, 48th or 49th in job growth nationally. Us in Maryland are at the very bottom of the list because of the sequestration.
Wow. And I believe last year in one of the special sessions, the Commonwealth had to tap the rainy day fund. There was also a federal contingency fund that was used to alleviate budget problems, but the budget problems still remain.
Yeah, the budget problems still remain. I think it showed great foresight on the General Assembly's part to have our revenue stabilization fund, and I'm glad we're able to rely on that. But I think, like my colleagues said, really the long-term way to handle this is through economic diversification, and I'm real proud that the governor is working hard to bring new businesses into Virginia and to grow businesses organically here in Virginia. One bill that I'm working with him on is a solar energy economic development authority, very similar to our wind energy authority. The idea is to create those public-private partnerships to attract that kind of development to Virginia and to look for opportunities to reduce the burdens for entry into that economic arena.
And I saw recently, I believe, that Dominion is going to, at least they've made an application to the State Corporation Commission for a solar farm. I believe it's in Fauquier County, but that's something else that I know in terms of green energy that you're interested in as well.
Yeah, no, it's, Woody, that's actually really exciting, and the media has totally missed what I thought was the important part of it. They're very focused on the fact that Dominion, there was two filings. One was for a 120-acre solar facility, utility-scale 20-megawatt solar facility in Fauquier. And it's great that Dominion is finally putting some solar energy on the grid that will benefit everyone. The piece of the application that I think benefits the districts that we represent most directly is they're also going to, they've applied to create a 2-megawatt project, which they will then sell solar power directly to consumers anywhere in Northern Virginia who want to purchase solar energy specifically for their house. And they get to buy it in 100 kilowatt blocks up to 5 blocks or 500 kilowatts. So you can pay Dominion about an extra $4 a month per block, net that energy off that solar panel against your home energy bill.
I see.
And so for people that live in established neighborhoods like we represent, that have tree cover, or they live in condominiums, or live in a homeowners association that doesn't allow solar, you'll actually be able to buy solar energy from Dominion to apply in your house. And I think that's going to be very popular in Northern Virginia when they get approval for it.
Right.
Great.
Well, Dominion's also reaching out to colleges, and I've been talking to them about high schools to install solar panels and share some of the profits with the universities and the high schools, which I think is a very exciting project.
You're also working on some other exciting activities, paid sick leave, for example, for employees. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the paid sick leave bill was killed, actually rather loudly murdered yesterday.
There were screams.
Yeah. But
we need bulletproof vests in some of these committees.
Yeah. But essentially, 40% of the workers in the Commonwealth don't have paid sick leave, and that's 1,300,000 something people, and that's a serious, serious problem. And it's not only about the fact that paid sick leave handles a lot of problems that people have to lose income for because they leave work to take care of their sick children, their elderly parents, but it's also about equity between the genders, because the paid sick leave gives the women who are paid 79 cents on the dollar an opportunity to balance their lives and get ahead in the employment market. Unfortunately, the committee thought that we should trust employers to be generous, and they voted the bill down.
Same thing happened on minimum wage, I believe.
Yes, that was right after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scott, tell us about family life education. I know there's a bill you have dealing with explicit communications.
Right. Last year, I put in legislation to take what is, I guess, commonly called as sexting. That is, when two juveniles send an explicit picture by text message or email to each other. I put in a bill to make that a misdemeanor and to create an education diversion program so that children could be taken aside and taught and educated and the charge could be dismissed. It's behavior that is for an adult is not criminal, but if a juvenile sends a picture like that, it's a felony. It's child pornography. That bill died. There's been 3 huge incidents since then. There was a big a ring of children, I think, up in Great Falls. There was one in Louisa. And then there was this incident in Manassas where the police officer tried to get a warrant.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it's a growing problem, and a lot of kids are doing it. And I've spoke on a national panel this summer about it, and heard some testimony from some child psychologists who talked about how it's really a function of genes, hormones, lack of prefrontal lobe development. You know, the things that make all of us stop from doing stupid things is when our frontal lobe turns on and tells us don't do that, and kids don't have that developed. And so my bill basically would require schools in Virginia to do education about sexting awareness and online safety awareness as part of sex education. So to teach children, this is criminal behavior, it's a felony, you shouldn't do it, there are long-term consequences from it. Once that picture goes out, you can't control who has it. And also to teach them about being careful about talking to strangers online, that just because you're in a chat room doesn't mean that the other person on the other side is who they know they are. I mean, children don't have the maturity or to deal with these issues. And I think it's natural to fit it in as part of sex education, because the psychologists were saying that a lot of this stuff is part of normal child sex development, and it's something that ought to be talked about now that they have these other things available to them that they didn't when all these programs were originally developed. It's a mushrooming problem, and our system isn't dealing with it. And I just thought it's better to invest in prevention rather than try and deal with the consequences.
Yeah, I fully support Scott's bill, and one of the consequences of the way it works now in the school system when a student is accused and or found guilty of sexting is that that case automatically goes into the criminal courts. And that's a problem also.
Yeah.
It should be, I would prefer that it be kept in the education system and dealt with as a violation of student code of conduct, and I think Scott's bill will push us in that direction.
You know, it's kind of interesting you bring that up, because that's part of the debate now concerning sexual assault on our college campuses. How do we protect the privacy of the victim versus ensuring that the perpetrator doesn't get away with it? Do you use the criminal justice system, or do you use the university or some other mechanism?
Sitting on the education committee, and I think we had the first ever joint education and courts committee meeting just to make sure that we understood the existing system, why it was set up that way, so that we heard from law enforcement, so that we heard from victims' rights advocates. And a lot of this comes down to the Title IX coordinator. This is the person that is appointed by every single college and university to be the front end of handling this. And it really is a delicate balance of respecting the victim's rights and wishes, with also balancing the need to protect the public at large if you potentially have somebody who's a serial rapist on board. And so, you know, I'm pretty sure there are some tweaks that we'll need to make to the law to make sure that that Title IX coordinator gets the information that she or he needs to make those kind of decisions, and also to make sure that they're properly trained in helping to make those decisions and working with the victim.
And of course, Kate, Title IX is the federal gender equity law that governs a number of things, but more importantly our colleges and universities. Talk to us about that tension that David mentioned between, you know, the needs of law enforcement versus the needs of privacy, especially as it relates to Title IX.
Well, thank you for asking me about that, because my main concern in this whole debate is about victim privacy. And I have someone in my family who was involved in an issue, and it became very, very public, and that person ultimately transferred because they couldn't be themselves. They were constantly being identified as the victim of whatever it was. And that's just very sad and extremely traumatic. Actually, there's a group here today, Sexual Assault Awareness Advocates, who are specifically concerned with victims' rights. And yes, Title IX is important, and the Title IX staff is very important. And I just don't think that we should regulate their behavior. I appreciate all the bills that are in now trying to protect students and students who have been violated or attacked. But I am equally concerned with the victims' rights, and I hope that we can strengthen the Title IX positions and not have to mix local law enforcement with the university staff.
Scott, as I understand, the concern about a mandatory reporting requirement to law enforcement in particular is that it may diminish the number of victims who report
Exactly.
the assaults.
Right.
Yeah, that's what the people who live these cases every day tell us, that they have serious concerns about whether people will come forward if they know it's definitely going to the police. Right now, the victims tend to be given some deference as to whether or not a case proceeds or not outside of the college
Right,
situation.
right.
As soon as you mandate that on the college side, that's the big concern. And I tend to defer to people who have to work these cases every day in terms of their judgment, because I don't live it or see it like they do, and they're hard matters for people to appreciate if they haven't been in the
Right.
middle of one before.
Right, exactly.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I want to interrupt, and then I'm sorry, I will be quiet for the rest of the time. But I have a bill in that actually has been passed to the floor, creating Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is something that a number of states are doing nationally. The college students are participating in education about how to protect yourself, but more importantly, how to deal with the staff on the university level, and about victims' privacy rights. So I am looking forward to working with a number of the advocacy groups and coming up with some campaigns, education campaigns, that we can proceed on, because I'm pretty sure that bill will pass ultimately. It would be kind of hard to vote against it.
Great, that's good. Access to electronic textbooks, why is that so important?
Kay wants to talk about that one too.
No, I'll be quiet.
But the county Fairfax County rolled out electronic textbooks about 3 years ago.
Yes.
I think, and they didn't really, I think about it or think it through or plan for it properly. And textbooks all around the entire country are heading in this direction, and they're not just PDF,
Right.
static piece of paper. They're interactive. They have interactive homework problems. You can link to outside media content, videos, and things. Gives you real-time feedback as you're doing homework on some of them. I would say about half the children in the area I represent either don't have their own personal computer or they don't have access to broadband at home. And so asking children to do their learning electronically, to me, it's not only inappropriate, I think it's actually illegal. Our Constitution says we have to provide every child a free textbook. It says that in our Constitution since 1904. And when the state mandates that children use a certain thing, electronic resource to learn, to do their homework, to communicate with their teachers, I think they have to provide them with a computer. And it's already being done in 5 or 6 jurisdictions: Henrico, Albemarle, Chesterfield, Arlington, Alexandria. But it's not being done in Fairfax, and it's not even talked about. And I have a bill in that would mandate, it says that if any jurisdiction wants to use an electronic textbook, they have to have a plan in place to provide every child a computer by 2017, and they also have to be able to have adequate broadband within each school. And it's absolutely critical. Computers are going to be an essential part of learning going forward.
Your membership on education has confronted you with a number of issues last year, this year, especially in relation to standards of learning. There were some changes last year. There are others being debated now. Where do you think things are going to come out?
Yeah, last year we made some big changes to the standards of learning with respect to kindergarten through 6th grade, because those are things that aren't as intertwined with federal requirements. And so, the idea is not to reduce the amount of accountability, that's very important, but to also provide some flexibility for actually assessing the performance of a child and what that child has actually learned. And so that requires some flexibility in the code, and we eliminated a few SOL tests. This year, we're starting to see the fruit of a committee that we put together to look at further reforming the SOLs for high schools. And again, it's just that balancing act with accountability versus flexibility. But I think we're moving in the right direction in a couple of different ways. And one is ensuring that if you have a student who can demonstrate proficiency through an AP test or an IB test or through some other means, that you also don't require them to take basic courses or to have to take an SOL. And so you got a lot of parents, I think, throughout the region where kids get bored in class because they're required to learn things that they already know. And so this is an opportunity to maximize the time that student spends in high school.
What about the ability to retake an SOL within a finite period of time?
You've been reading my mind. The governor is very supportive of allowing school systems to have an expedited retake process, and that would deal directly with the problem that David brought up. However, it does create another problem in the classroom, and that is a teacher balancing curriculum between the students who passed and the students who didn't. But I had, with Delegate Peter Farrell, a Republican, a bill about expedited SOL testing that the governor asked us to take, and it had a very short life. So I'm afraid that we're not dealing the way we should with that problem. And we are ultimately passing the costs on to the localities who have to use the tests that we tell them and then deal with the results.
And in terms of two other pieces of legislation that passed last year, but which seemed to be dead or dormant, there was the bill that passed that would allow the state to take over a failing school district. And then there was a bill that required school districts to be graded from A to F. I take it those things are, no longer, I won't say as important, but they're being rethought. And
Yeah.
I believe one of them was declared unconstitutional by
Yes.
a court in Roanoke or
Norfolk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Opportunity Education Institute, OEI.
Right.
That was not only declared unconstitutional by Roanoke Circuit Judge, it was also defunded by us in the budget, so
Okay.
that the body to do it has no money, no staff or no anything. So I think that's just dead.
Well, it's in a few bills this year.
Well, maybe they're trying to bring it back. Maybe they're trying to tweak it. I don't know, but I don't think that's going anywhere. The school grading issue, we passed that, and that's been on the books now for 2 or 3 years. Last year, though, we deferred the issuance of the grades pending to give more time to try and figure out exactly how to issue them. And there is a lot of controversy over those. A lot of members feel like that's going to be redlining schools. That is, as soon as you
Right.
put a grade on a school, it'll make the neighborhood toxic.
Actually, Education Committee just this morning, we passed out a bill that eliminates the A through F.
Really? Okay.
And replaces it again, with something that is going to be more meaningful to the parent, so that you can look at all the metrics, by which a school can be judged and the progress that a school is making. And so I think over the last 2 years, we've had a good vetting process. I think there was a lot of uncomfort with that A through F, and I was very uncomfortable with that A through F because, you're boiling something down to a single letter grade. Ultimately, what we're winding up with, I think, is going to be healthy and robust, and get rid of, just boiling it down to one thing.
Got about 30 seconds left, so in 25 words or less, because you have a conflict of interest bill in, tell us what's going to happen on ethics reform from your point of view.
Well, I wish I could say definitively. What I hope is that we will take the governor's lead and put a cap of $100 on all tangible and intangible gifts.
Thank you. We'll leave it there. Thanks for being here, David Bulova, Scott Surovell, and Kate Kory.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much.
us.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.